It had been a while since I had recharged myself, and I was beginning to get worried about the integrity of my system after MOTH had found me. There was only one place where I could fortify my defenses from any further hacking or tracking. The city of Reevesbury. Reevesbury is one of the three main cities of New Haven. It is also New Haven's oldest city and settlement. It had gone through a very dark and trying time in the past 2 decades. The city had gone through a period where it was divided into 2 areas. One side for the rich and middle class and the other for the poor. The poor side was named the Wasteland. The Wasteland was a barren and desolate area. It was run by criminals and the residents lived in fear. Things got so bad that the New Haven government made a decision which to some is still considered to be the biggest human rights violations in the country's history. They built a border between the Wasteland and the rest of Reevesbury. For years the police barely even showed their faces in the Wasteland, leading to a very hostile environment. Residents had to look to vigilantes and activist groups that would sprout from the hopelessness. One of these groups was the Foundation, a hacker collective that specialized in cyber warfare against the different gangs in the city. The city was in a state of healing when I arrived after fleeing New Asia. The biggest crime lord Wes Crimson had been killed, which led to a breakdown of the Wasteland status quo and an eventual takedown of the wall. So it was quite easy for me to move around without drawing too much attention to myself. I spent 30 minutes scanning for any traces of the Foundation until I located an IP address that I could link to an anonymous tip that led to a major sex trafficking ring. Unfortunately, it was hidden behind firewalls and a VPN. It took a while, but I eventually broke in and located the hideout. The hideout was located underneath an old building that was in the process of being refurbished as part of the mayor's program to revitalize the city. The basement of the building had to be accessed from a door behind the building tucked away behind a staircase. I walked up to the door and scanned the inside for any devices. I picked up a lot of activity. I knew I was in the right place. I knocked on the door. There was no reply. I knocked once more. After 3 seconds of my second knock, I heard a deep voice from the other side ask me for the password. I had to think fast, so I did another scan of the building looking for any trace of a password. In a split second, I found a recently deleted message on the phone of a teenage girl that was inside. She needed the Foundation to help her erase an unflattering image of her surfacing online that would destroy her future. A friend of hers that had recommended the Foundation had sent her the daily entry password. The password was grassroots. I uttered the password and I was led in by a large gentleman who was standing guard. I walked through a long hallway until I got to a room full of people working away at their computers. None of them paid much attention to me. They were all employees of the main figurehead. They probably wouldn't have the skills to help me out. I needed someone skilled enough to remove any tracking protocols placed by Dr. Candle and to add a further layer of encryption around my personal files. I began hacking into their machines in search of one that would take more than 5 minutes to break into. I got into all the machines with ease. All except one. This machine was not in the room I was standing in. I had definitely found the boss's system. At that moment, the door at the end of the room opened, and a middle-aged Asian woman walked out. She quickly scanned the room until she locked eyes with me. She walked straight towards me and stared me down. She then grinned. I introduced myself. She did the same. Her name was Dawn. She then gestured for me to follow her into her office. I cautiously followed her into a small room with a wooden desk with a desktop setup in the most aesthetically pleasing way. The room was lit up with neon lights and had a single visitor's chair opposite Dawn's desk. She sat down at her desk and pointed at the visitor's chair. I decided to stand. I could tell she was a bit offended, but she brushed it off and asked how she could help me. I carefully explained my predicament. I expressly emphasized that all I wanted was the ability to move around without being tracked or hunted down. She thought for a second. She then stood up and picked up a small device on her desk. She told me she could help me out. She then revealed I was not her first Android customer and that she had helped another Android disappear before. She got closer to me and reached for my head. I quickly grabbed her arm before she could place the device on my head. I really wanted to trust her. I could tell that she was compassionate and that she just wanted to help. But with everything that happened with Emil, I was still not willing to trust another person so quickly. She smiled at me and backed away a bit. She sat on her desk and asked me to tell her what was bothering me. It was an odd situation. As a machine, I knew that telling her about Emil was just a simple exchange of information. But I still couldn't find the power to relate my experience. I could see in her face that she was sincere. She saw me for who I was. It was refreshing to have someone not look at me as a product or weapon. To her, I was a being. I opened up to her about Emil. Turns out she knew all about him. She went to university with him. She always had suspicions that he had very unsavory motives when it came to his obsessions with AI and machines. She had put me at ease. She asked me if I was ready to let her into my system. I nodded my head. She placed the magnetic device onto my neck. Then I felt a slow and soft flow of waves pulsate through me. She was in my system, but it didn't feel intrusive. I knew that I had made the right decision by letting her in.